The luxury goods and travel industries are feeling the effects of the coronavirus. Hi there, I'm JR, the producer of Plain English, and I want to welcome you to episode 238. Now, here's Jeff for the rest of the episode.
Perfect. Thanks, JR. Coming up today, the most exclusive stores in the world's best shopping destinations are eerily quiet, the result of travel restrictions and fears of the coronavirus. In the second part of the episode, we'll talk about the English phrase silver lining, and we have a language-related quote of the week. The video lesson for this episode will teach you how to use the phrase not to mention as a way to emphasize a point that you're making. As always, that's on the episode webpage at plainenglish.com/238. The coronavirus has taken a significant human toll with tens of thousands infected and about 2,500 people dead around the world. But in addition to the human toll, the world economy is starting to feel the negative effects of the virus too. China is often called the world's factory because it makes so much of the world's manufactured goods. Shipments of technology products are expected to take a huge hit in the first quarter of this year. According to one estimate, TV shipments are expected to be 5% lower, video games and smartphones 10% lower, computers and smart speakers 12% lower, and smart watches 16% lower than the quarter before. Many factories have not reopened after closing for China's traditional Lunar New Year. This manufacturing slowdown has knock-on effects with the technology companies that sell these products. Already, Apple has told investors that it will be making less money in this quarter due to disruptions in the global supply chain. But that's not all. So many of Apple's customers are Chinese, and the affluent Chinese consumers who normally buy upscale products are staying home and not spending money. The effect of lower spending by affluent Chinese consumers will be felt across the world. Jefferies, an investment bank, estimates that Chinese consumers generate 40% of global spending on luxury goods. Burberry, the British luxury fashion brand, has had to close about a third of its stores in China and said that foot traffic in its remaining Chinese stores was down 80%. High street luxury retailers in the world's capital cities like Paris, Hong Kong, Dubai, and New York are seeing lower traffic. At the Times Square Mall in Hong Kong's Causeway Bay neighborhood, employees outnumbered shoppers in the most expensive jewelry stores and fashion boutiques. The effects are being felt far from China, too. The Chanel and Louis Vuitton flagship stores on London's Bond Street were empty. February is a big month on the calendar of the world's fashion capitals, Paris, Milan, New York. About 1,000 Chinese fashion buyers stayed home rather than attend the top fashion shows in Europe. Several Chinese designers canceled shows. Italy is bracing for a big slowdown in exports. Gucci, in an attempt to keep Chinese fashion buyers interested this year, live streamed its catwalk show. Organizers at Fashion Week in Paris and Milan scrambled to set up live streaming on Weibo, a popular platform in China. Luxury fashion brands will also struggle to meet the rest of the world's demand since so much of their goods are made in China. Makers of coats, handbags, scarves, shoes, swimsuits, and other products rely on China's cotton, silk, and other fabrics, not to mention its labor. Ralph Lauren makes a quarter of its products in China. The tourism industry is also hurting. On January 23rd, there were 12,814 flights within China. 3 weeks later, on February 13th, there were just 1,662 flights. On the same 2 days, the numbers of international departures from China were 2,000, and then 3 weeks later, just 350. Popular destinations for Chinese travelers are feeling the effects. Fewer tourists are visiting the temples of Kyoto, the museums of Europe, and the beaches of Thailand. Chinese consumers represent a fifth of all tourism spending around the world, and many countries have banned travelers from China. Japan, Australia, India, Indonesia, New Zealand, the Philippines, Singapore, and Vietnam all have strict bans on Chinese travelers. Popular destinations like America and Europe will be affected, but they have a diverse base of tourists from other places to fall back on. But countries like Malaysia, Singapore, Cambodia, South Korea, and Thailand rely heavily on Chinese visitors for their tourism spending, and tourism is a big part of their economies. Vietnam is expected to lose $3 billion in tourism spending. Bookings by travel agents in Vietnam were down over 70% from the same period a year ago. Bali, a beach destination in Indonesia, has seen 20,000 hotel bookings canceled, even though Indonesia doesn't have a single confirmed case of the virus. There is a silver lining for people who keep their heads and assess the risks. China has tens of thousands of confirmed cases of coronavirus and has essentially shut down. But savvy travelers might take advantage of thinner crowds and lower hotel rates at destinations like Vietnam, Thailand, and Indonesia, where there are many fewer cases of the virus. I just confirmed a flight to Europe for May, but if I hadn't done that, I would be tempted to visit some countries in Southeast Asia like Indonesia or Thailand. I bet you can get some good hotel prices right about now. The expression I have for you today is silver lining. I'm going to tell you what a lining is first, and then give you the full expression. A lining is usually the thin fabric that covers the inside of a garment. A garment is a piece of clothing. A common place to find a lining is in a sport coat or a suit coat for men. So you gentlemen out there, or you ladies with a gentleman in your life, check out your suit coat and look on the inside, the part that touches your shirt. There's probably a silky smooth fabric in that part, and that is the lining. There's an old expression in English that goes like this: every cloud has a silver lining. And in this case, a cloud is a symbol of something dark and gloomy, something sad, something unpleasant. But the silver lining is the part of a bad situation that is good. So the expression, every cloud has a silver lining, means that you can find a little bit of good in any bad situation. It's common in speech to simply refer to a silver lining. You don't need to mention the cloud because everyone knows what it means. Earlier in this episode, you heard me say this: there is a silver lining for travelers who keep their heads and assess the risks. They can get lower prices on hotels and cheaper flights. No doubt, the situation in countries like Thailand and Indonesia is bad, even though they are not suffering directly from coronavirus. People are staying away out of fear of the virus. It's safe to travel to those countries, but they're hurting because of general unease. That opens up an opportunity for people who want to travel and who know that it's not too risky to do so. That opportunity is the one good thing about this crisis. I want to emphasize that when you say silver lining, you're not minimizing the gravity of the situation. In fact, when you say silver lining, you're acknowledging that the main part of the situation is pretty bad, but nonetheless, there can be something good about it. Can you think of another silver lining to this crisis? I can think of one. Do you remember when we talked about the race to develop a vaccine for coronavirus? Researchers are attempting to create a DNA-based vaccine, and that is something that has not yet been tried on such a large scale. The race to develop the coronavirus vaccine will give vaccine researchers practice developing these new DNA-based vaccines. The work they do now under pressure may help develop other vaccines for other diseases in the future. So the silver lining in this situation is that we are going to learn more as a society about DNA-based vaccines. That doesn't mean I'm happy that this work is necessary. Far from it. But it is, nevertheless, a small positive effect from an overall bad situation. For many people, losing their job is traumatic. It's a terrible feeling to get the notice that your job is being eliminated or that you have been let go because the company doesn't want you working there anymore. But for some people, there is a silver lining. They can take the occasion to start a new business or look for a job in a field that they like better. It's never good to lose a job, but the silver lining is that it gives you the opportunity to start a business or find something better. Did you watch the Oscars this year? Netflix was hoping to have a big night. The Irishman was nominated for 10 awards, but came home empty-handed. No awards. Netflix wants to be taken seriously as a movie studio, and a big night at the Oscars would have given the streaming giant some much-needed validation. But it wasn't to be. as the South Korean film Parasite cleaned up. But there is a silver lining for Netflix. The fact that the Oscars were given to an international film, the Best Picture prize was given to an international film, that is a silver lining for Netflix, because Netflix is so strong with international films. So sure, Netflix didn't win a lot this year, but they are so strong with international films, and international films are gaining greater acceptance at the Academy Awards. So there is some hope for next year. That is the silver lining for Netflix. A friend of mine is going through a tough time with his family. One of his uncles has cancer, and the prognosis isn't very good. His uncle is probably going to die. In talking to him about it, though, my friend acknowledged that there is a silver lining to the situation, and that is his family is becoming closer as a result. Family members who had drifted apart are now reconnecting in their support of my friend's uncle. The situation is undoubtedly very sad, but the silver lining is that it is helping some family members reconnect with one another. I've got a language-related quote of the week for you today. Before I read you the quote, I need to teach you a word, and that is dialect. A dialect is a regional variety of a language. Speakers of different dialects can usually, but not always, understand one another. Spanish has several dialects. European Spanish and the Spanish of Latin America are different dialects. The differences include pronunciation and the use of vosotros in Europe versus ustedes in the Americas. Even within Latin America, some regions use vos versus tú. Regardless, though, almost any Spanish speaker can understand any other Spanish speaker around the world, even if they speak different dialects. It's different in China. Mandarin is the biggest dialect, but even within Mandarin, there are regional varieties. But about 35% of Chinese speakers speak dialects other than Mandarin, and not all are mutually intelligible. A Min dialect speaker and a Mandarin dialect speaker might not understand each other, for example. So what is the difference between a dialect and a language? Here's today's quote from the scholar Max Weinreich. A language is a dialect with an army and a navy. Get it? The point he's making is that different dialects of Chinese are farther apart than the differences between, say, Spanish and Portuguese. So why are Spanish and Portuguese considered languages? Well, because Spain and Portugal had armies and navies. The quote is not entirely serious, but it's meant to draw attention to the fact that what we call a language versus a dialect is a little arbitrary and related as much to politics and warfare as to actual differences between writing and speech. A language is a dialect with an army and a navy. That's all for today's episode, written, recorded, and produced all in Chicago since JR is here visiting. Thanks to JR for introducing the episode. Coming up on Thursday, we humans may have a new member of our collective family tree. For all of you who have read the book Sapiens, or if you're interested in archaeology and the origins of the human race, this is the episode for you. That will be out on Thursday. Don't miss it. If you've enjoyed today's episode, then you'll love Plain English Plus, our new membership. One of the best parts about it is the video lessons, which help you express more complicated ideas. I mentioned earlier that the video lesson for this episode is about how to add emphasis to a point you're making with the phrase not to mention. If that sounds interesting, then you'd love exploring the more than 50 similar videos we have on our website just for Plain English Plus members. And we make 2 new video lessons each week. They're each about 10 minutes long, so really accessible and easy to follow. So if you think that would be helpful, come join us at plainenglish.com/plus, plainenglish.com/plus.